Okay. Oh, my light is weird today. Oh, good morning. My name is Samantha Mirabal with Melco's application team doing our DesignShop Talk again. See what questions you might have, try to get them answered. I had just a few questions come in really late today, so that's why I'm a little late. I was trying to put them into my PowerPoint. So I will start with those. If you have questions while we're live, please type them in on the chat. Let me quick make sure both platforms are up. All right, that is, whoa. No, I don't want to watch that. Sorry, YouTube. I was trying to check YouTube and apparently it thinks I need to watch something else. Okay, so YouTube is live, that's cool. And there is Facebook, so we are good to go. All right, so I will start off with questions sent in. And again, if you see me looking off to the side, I have a second monitor set up with my little chat window so I can try to keep track of anything that comes in live. If you have them while we're live, type them in on the chat. Don't send them privately. I don't see those. So just put them in and they'll pop up over here and I'll try to get them addressed. All right, so this one, there were a whole lot of words that came with it, but fundamentally they said, I've got this decorative, I want it to do this, but it's doing this. What gives? How do I fix it? Okay, so this is just a matter of paying attention to your starts and stops, okay? Because remember, a decorative, you're telling it where to start sewing, and each repeating pattern is going to start there, okay? So if you want it to start here for the entire pattern, you're going to have to make sure that it's going to start over there, all right? So let's go look at it. I'm going to open this guy up, and I'll show you, I've already fixed it, but I'm going to go do it for you real time. So I'll show you what it's going to look like when we fix it. Test. No, not tack head. Test. Okay. So now, how was that done? So first off, let's look at this guy. So if I look at this, we're telling it that's the first element. So it's telling to start there. So when this thing goes to copy and go for a second pattern, this one's ending here. So it's going to start and stop almost on top of each other, which is not what you want, right? That's why it's looking so weird. So what we really want is we want this to be able to have this thing overlap right here, all right? So what I did is I moved this end point to here, all right? So if I want that guy to have this little thing hanging into the hole, and I need my repeat to start where this one ended, that means I'm going to have this entire pattern, so this one here, start somewhere around there. So you can move it manually if you want. I'll tell you, I do not like doing that for these, but so that's not how I actually ended up fixing it. I prefer to do a running stitch, right? So I know exactly where it's starting. So I'm going to start there, run down to this. I'm going to make, oh, that needs to be a walk stitch. There we go. I'm going to make that the first thing, and then it's going to do this, sewing from here to there. Then it's going to sew this guy from there to there. And now when it repeats, so if I make that, all right, so the start and stop all have to be on this line, and you need to have it start where you want the pattern to begin again, okay? And this one end where you want the pattern to begin again, all right? So I started there, I ended right on the end of this little tab. So right click, save custom shape. I'm going to call it test 1, save it as a decorative and say okay. So now if I do a new line decorative, change that to test 1. There you go. So you've got to tell it, so, and that's because this second pattern right here is starting here where that tab ended. So it sews this guy, comes around and does this. It ends here, sews this guy, comes around. So it's a matter of just paying attention to your starts and stops of where you want, how you want it to overlap, and accounting for that, okay? So you could, I prefer to do the walking stitch in there rather than relying on my starts and like the auto-created running stitches. That's only with decoratives that I do that. The other stuff, I just let the software do what it wants, but decoratives I'm a little more controlling on personally. Okay, so Rachel, no problem. So that's this guy. sometimes my satin stitches look too far apart when going around an applique. So how dense is too dense for a satin stitch? That's kind of a loaded question, right? Because there's a lot of factors there. How wide is your satin stitch? What thread are you using? Are you using a 60 weight thread or a 40 weight thread? What type of material you're sewing on. Some of them tend to fraying, others hold down really nicely. So personally, I use around a 3.8 density, 3.7, somewhere in there for 40 weight thread. It seems to work pretty well for me, but what is too dense for a 40 weight thread? I don't know. Again, it depends, right? What are you sewing on? What are the fabrics? I wouldn't go under 3.3 personally, but that's me, right? So we're all a little bit different, and we also on different materials. So I like 3.3 as an absolute low. That's what I use routinely. More likely it's around 3.7, 3.8. That's more commonly. Okay, so hopefully that helps a little bit. Is there a way to print the design with the crosshairs to help lining up? Yeah, when you go to print it, there is you got to turn on the crosshairs. All right, so if they're off, it won't print. If you have them on, when you go to the print screen, you can tell it to print with the origin. So come here, I'm trying to move it over, sorry. All right, so on the actual print screen, oh my gosh. It's like I go live and everyone decides now is the perfect time to start blowing up my phone. Okay, so right here, you can tell it by turning on the origin. If you have the grid on, it will also print the grid. So, but that only works if these are visible here. So when they're visible there, you can go and toggle that origin and grid on to have it show up. Okay. So it's just that simple. You just toggle them on or off, but make sure they're visible on the screen first. Okay. There's a typed in question. Would you use a ballpoint needle for knit fabrics like sweatshirts? The applique was going on that. Yeah. So I'll be honest, I use ballpoint needles pretty much exclusively on everything. That being said, and that includes hats. Should I use them on hats? No, I should not. Hats will always sew better with sharps. So, but in the scheme, most of what I do is just on regular fabrics, things like that. So ballpoints are fine. When it comes to hats, like I'm running a pile of hats out there right now, and they're running all with ballpoint needles. But I do that with this exception. I leave the ballpoints is what's in the machine, which is why I start that way. I don't change them out just to run a job. But if I have the first sign of issues, I know sharps are better. So then I'll switch over to sharps. I do my very first hat. And if it looks like it's not running cleanly, then I'll change it all out to the sharps, which is going to be better for hats. But I'm pseudo lazy and not wanting to change needles unless I have to. Not a good reason, but that's why I do it. All right. So Rachel, that's what I use. I would suggest ballpoints. I have an expanded file, like a tree. You want to get rid of the tree trunk. All right, so you want to do expanded editing. Cool. So let's go. All right. New file. I'm going to draw an ugly tree trunk. I'm going to save this off as an expanded. And I'm going to do even sillier branches just so this will be all expanded and you can see what we're doing. Oh, here, let's do this. Take this guy and we're going to pretend that's a branch. All right, I'm just making ugly stuff right at the moment so I can show you editing when this is all separate. Okay. Let's do that way. Hey, good morning. Thanks for joining. All right, this is incredibly ugly. Oh, well. File, save as. I'm going to save it as a DST file, so it's an expanded type. Yeah, okay. And now we're going to go open that. There. All right, so now I've got something that's expanded that I can edit. Okay. So I've got my ugly thing here. and I want to delete stitches. So the real question you're asking is, I don't want to delete one stitch at a time. That's tedious. How do I select a bunch of these to delete them all at once? Well, it's as simple as using this custom selection tool. All right, so you select what you want to delete from. You turn on the expanded editing mode, and then I can come here to this custom stitch selection and go, okay, I want to delete all of these stitches there, and I'm drawing a big old circle, hit enter and hit delete, and now they're all gone, and it leaves just what we want left. Okay, so the same thing for these guys. So let's say I don't want the end of this thing, right? I can go into the expanded point editing, go to my custom point selection, select them, and hit delete. Okay, now you can of course do one at a time at deleting. That's tedious, but you can do it. Okay. Alex, red number 1. Oh, yay, I'm glad you're learning stuff. Okay, so let's see, what else? All right, so that's how we delete a whole bunch. So yeah, you can draw a box. It's using the custom point selection. Now, keep in mind, that tool is really cool. It works not only with expanded point. So if I come over here, turn on expanded, and now I use the custom point selection, draw a circle around what I want to delete. So it can work that way. But on the same thing over here, this is a wireframe, right? So I'm going to add a bunch of points. Okay, so let's say I want to get rid of half those points I just added. I can also come over into my custom point selection, just draw around it. And notice now all of those triangles are now black. So now I can hit delete and they delete as once. Okay. So you can do it with wireframe points. You can do it with expanded points. If you're trying to select multiple objects, I can come over here and, you know, say select those. Now those two things are selected. So it's just a custom point selection. Whatever you draw around, it will select, depending on what you're trying to do. Okay. All right, what else? I'm trying to learn how to do applique. I know there's a lot of videos. Are there certain letters that I use? Okay. So applique is it's interesting, right? Because most people will buy applique files, which are already set up. Now, if you want to create your own, you got to know how applique works to start with. Once you know how it works, then digitizing it is easy. So we have some videos that were done. There's one all about applique. It's probably 2 or 3 years old now by this point. Might even be a little older than that, but we can get you a link for that. So that would be one to look at. It will show the actual process of laying the fabric down out by the machines rather than just here with me waving my hands. If you're trying to do applique text, with the new software, any version can be turned into that. So let's do this. I'm going to turn that into, let's do the Buffo font. It's cute. Okay. And I want it bigger. So let's set, because, all right, and I'm going to center it. So sewing this would be a little annoying because it's 40,000 stitches, but we could do it as applique. So how? Go to properties, come over here and change it to applique. Hit apply. And now the file is set up for it. And that with the new version of the software, you can do that with any font. Now, all you want to do, let's say you want to modify the properties of the applique. Right here, you can change it down to applique. And now you have full control over it, of where the tack down goes, what the density of the top stitching, what the density of the tackle stitch, what underlays are you using for each of it. You have full control of all of that. What type of tie-in and tie-out styles you personally like. Because what I like, you might not like, which is cool. So you can come through and, add pull compensation, change this. My favorite thing is to change this split to a 60-40 split. So let's see, 40% outside. So I prefer I don't want 40 in, I want 60 in. There we go. There we go. So that's my preference. So what that does is it sews more of the top stitching on the actual fabric than off of it. And that just, because I don't like to I don't cut super, super close. So if I have more hanging off or more, if I don't do it right, I'll end up with fabric hanging out. So 60-40 works pretty well with how I cut the fabrics. All right, I've seen people using puff with a stitch around the sweatshirts, capital letters only. How do you cut the puff? Okay, I think what you're saying is, correct me if I'm just going to use what I have on the screen just to make sure I understand what you're asking. So you're asking, how do you do just this outline of the text as puff on a sweatshirt? Is that right? So the outline of the letter rather than the a fill on there. Is that what you're asking? Let me know. Okay. All right, so let's go on that assumption first. So capital letters, S. This is not a good font for it, but okay. Let me change it to the puff one. Puff. At least this one's designed for this. Well, actually it doesn't matter. So if you're going to be doing this as a, yeah, this doesn't matter for what we're talking about. So I'm going to go back to just a basic block. All right, so what you want to do is, if all you're doing is the outline, to be puff, so you can type whatever letter you want, get it the size you want. So I don't know, 2 inches tall. Okay, so whatever size you want. I can then, on my keyboard, hold my select the font, hold my shift key down, and click on that single line. All right, now I can delete the letter, and I'm left with just this outline. So now that I can make it wider, which would look better as puff, right? I can change the density properties to be more puff-like. I wonder, I haven't tried this. Let's see if it works. Ooh, look at that. Let's go look at the properties and see if it actually, what is the auto doing? Oh yeah, that's nice. Okay. And the underlay. Okay, that's cool. All right, so you can do that, right? So the only thing you've got to remember for this would be to make sure you have a basic underlay to hold the puff down before it goes and sews this. But yeah, this would, all the edges have needle penetrations, meaning the puff would be completely cut here and on the outside. So when you pick it out, you can pick this inside out and the outside out. So MK Buddy, did that help? How can I make a file? While I'm waiting for your answer, I'm going to go look at this. How can I make a file to send to my cutter to cut the twill? Okay, I tried sending as an EPS, but I'm not seeing it. All right, so where did this thing go? Okay, so my favorite way to do it is to take, so I'm going to take this operations, convert to wireframe, and from here, file, save applique outline, and S, you can change it to an SVG or an EPS, but you've got to save the outline as that. If you save the entire file as an SVG, it's not going to work, okay? So the other way you can do it, which is also handy, is if you convert it all the way down to just a walk stitch. And this is foolproof in my opinion. If you take that one, copy, go to a new file, paste, center it, file, save as, change it to an SVG, and there's the S, save. Now I've got that to be able to load. So you've got to get it down to just the line is what you're saving. If you save the whole file, it's not going to save it right. Okay, John, did that help? Okay, so it looks like that helped for the puff as well. Let's see if that's for the line. Any other questions while we're live? Because I think I've run out of things to talk about. Oh, excellent, John. I'm glad that helped. Okay, so applique, we talked about that. Okay, so in some of my expanded files, they have crazy long jump stitches. When I go in and set the parameters to have them auto trim, they don't. Is there a way to fix it? It's under the properties in the filter, and it only works when you open the file. So you have to close a file and reopen it. I'm trying to remember where it is. Design filter, this guy right here, max stitch length, and then accumulate short stitches. That's it right there. No, whatever. These are the, accumulate jump stitches. There we go. That one. So it'll accumulate them and get rid of them. So when you open the file, you've got to close the file and reopen it, and that should filter them all out for you. If you just change settings, it's not going to filter it. You've got to close the file and reopen it because it does it at opening. Okay. All right, what other questions do we have? You have a question above? Alex. Alex, all I see is, yes, I made one. I don't see any other, and the other thing I don't understand, red finger number 1, this is the best, I always learn something. Oh, I see, my thing isn't getting the emojis. Is there a real difference from a logo made for a hat than a logo made for a shirt? Sorry, I missed that one, I apologize. Okay, so hat versus shirt. Hat, so bottom, top, center, out. I personally run hat files on shirts because I don't find the need to digitize one way and then have to redo it all for a hat. You know, there's nothing wrong with sewing center out, bottom to top on a shirt. So personally, that's what I do. And Gina just put a big old thing. Oh, you just put a link to removing jump stitches. Cool, thank you. But yeah, the only difference on hats is, all right, there's another thing, size. So that would be a real difference to have one for a shirt, one for a hat. Generally, your hat files are going to be a little smaller. But I always digitize it for the hat. And then if I need to make it bigger because I already digitized it, I scale it up because I have wireframe format. And it's still digitized as if it were sewing on a hat because it's center out, bottom to top. But I find that to be a good practice anyway for push-pull, that it's, rather than shoving fabric around, it's kind of building out. So that's how I like to do them. I use hat files on everything. Basically optimize, particularly if I'm sending stuff out. Okay, so the limits on scaling a logo. So if I digitize it within DesignShop, so it's wireframe based, I can scale it however I want, right? Because it's wireframe is going to recalculate stitches. I can do what I want and it'll be fine. If you're scaling expanded files, so these DST files, that's where you got to be careful because it's stretching things out or shrinking things down. So let's say I take a 40,000 stitch file that's big, you know, a jacket back, and I say, now I want to put that on a hat, and I cram it down. How do you think 40,000 stitches in a tiny little area is not going to sew well at all, right? So you've got a 10 to 20% scaling. So how do you scale by percent? Right here. So you'd select your design, the entire thing, click on the W or the H, and then right here, if I want to scale it down 10%, I would say 90%, and that scaled it 10% down. If I want to scale it 10% up, I would say 110. That scales it 10% up. So OFM, you can scale from 3.5 to 10 inch wide without issues. Yes, but, right? So yes, you can scale it up and it will recalculate the stitches. It'll change, it will fill in the wireframe and things like that. When you make drastic scales differences in the design, you may have to rethink about what type of element was used. Best way I can explain this is, let's say on a left chest logo, if you did that one first, right? You've got a border around it and you've got some fine little details. And the fine details, because it's so small, you might have done that with a running stitch, right? So you might have drawn, you know, an eyeball or whatever it is. Your detail work would have been done with a running stitch or a bean stitch. Now, when you made that really big, that bean stitch now looks puny, right? It looks too thin and you want it wider. So design-wise, you might have, because it's a bigger scale, you might have chosen, rather than doing it as a bean stitch for the detail, you might have done it as a single line, which is a wider, because it's so much larger, that small detail doesn't have to be so narrow, but you can still get the same look because it's bigger. So yes, you can, but when you make drastic size changes with native wireframe based things from big to small, you might have made different design decisions of what type of element you're going to use. You might use a fill for one size, but going to another, you might have used a column stitch, things like that. So yes, you can, but it's probably going to involve you looking at it and see, does it still make sense for the size that you're doing it at? You might have to redigitize some portions of it. Okay. What other questions? So I missed one, so I'm going to go a little bit slower looking through my questions to see if I missed any others. I did that. Okay. I think I got them all this time. Any other questions before I call it a day? Yeah, most of the questions came in just a few minutes before we went live, so I was scrambling trying to get everything copied out of online. And it doesn't look like anyone sent new ones while we've been live, so that's cool. Can we embroider on the bill of a hat? Can you? Yes. Should you? My opinion, no. But so embroidering on thick things, whether it be a belt, a thick, oh my gosh, karate belt, or a piece of cardboard, which essentially is what the brim of a hat is, or a piece of plastic. Can you? Yes. But I had a hat sitting around here. Okay. But what happens when you embroider on this, right? You'll end up with all the ugly stitching, the backing on the inside of the hat, which is not a good look. Most hats that are embroidered on the brim are done pre-construction, meaning they take this piece of fabric over here, they embroider it, then they give it to a pattern person who then sews it into this and turns it into a hat. Okay, so most of them are done pre-construction. So while you can sew on this, grab a clamp and sew on it, it'll sew. You just got to up your active feed and things like that. So use the same techniques in that video on embroidering thick materials you would use for this. It's not something I would do. If I really wanted something on the brim of a hat, I would make a patch and then glue it on or sew it on, or use some sort of iron-on adhesive and iron it. That way the inside of the hat doesn't look silly. Okay, so that would be my suggestion on it. More. Can you make a font look like it's embossed? Yes. So embossed, like as in, maybe I should make sure I understand what you're saying. I'm going to draw an example and you tell me if I guessed right. Okay, so I've got this. I got that. So different ways we can do this. So if I want that cut out, so it's kind of like an embossment on there, or a cutout, select the fill, select the lettering, right click on that to check the overlap. It's good. I can subtract it. And now I've got that, right? Okay, so that's one way. And I think, so that would basically make, if you're doing this on a towel, now all the little towel nubbies will stick out from here, right? So then I could change this, instead of being a dense fill, I could do it more like a 30 trapunto, trace border, underlay, turn that off, make this 0, 30, 90, sure, 20. And let's make that 0. Hey, that's cool. Okay, so there's that. I would have to go do that same thing to those things. So I could do it that way. If the other way you want to do it is to have it kind of stamped onto a fill. All right, so I've again got my fill. I can select my font, hit copy. I just Control-C on the keyboard. Click on this guy and then hold this down. There's this insert fill. Hold this guy down. There's that. Put that guy there. And now I have a stamped embossment on there that I can then go mess with. Yeah. He says I make it look easy. So I bang around on the software all the time, just like, I want to do this. How do I do it? And I just poke at it until I figure it out. So, and I've done that for years, so it's kind of all just stuck. So yeah, you can do it embossment a bunch of different ways. Are there any videos on how to make a split front design for a baseball jersey? Yes, there was one done by Sue and Nate several years back. So yes, there is a video out there. I'll see if we can get you a link for it. They did exactly that. The front of a, oh, there you go. We got the link for you. So yeah, we've got a video you can go check out and see if that helps any. It's in the comments. How do you do a lunchbox canvas but has insulation on the inside? You sew through it all. So the thing with that, when you have shift layers, you got to be careful about hooping it because you'll end up, one, the insulation, you're going to poke a gazillion holes through it all, right? And when you do that, the insulation factor is going to come down, all right? Same with raincoats and things like that. When you start poking a bunch of holes in it, it loses waterproof, it loses all sorts of things. So yeah, all you would do is hoop it and sew straight through it, making sure you're not shifting the layers. What I mean by that is like the back plasticky type lining, if that's up relative to where the front is, so it's kind of drifted up, during use, it's going to tend to rip, right? So you need to make sure that it's nice and flat before you hoop it so that none of the layers are shifted relative to each other. And then you just sew through it all. You would increase your active feed. The same techniques you use on the video we posted earlier on embroidering thick materials, so upping your active feed, raising your presser foot, all using different needles, all of that sort of, all of that sort of thing would apply to the thicker lunch boxes as well. Okay. Any other questions? Before I gotta fix this now. Man, I went halfway. Let me show you another trick. So this, I changed a bunch of stuff. So I'm gonna copy to clipboard. Now I'm gonna paste. That way I don't have to go change all those settings again. I'm just pasting onto those little guys the same properties as the other things. Ha! All right, there we go. All right. Any other questions before I bounce off for the day? And we've got, again, I'm not quite sure what's going to happen for June because I can't do most of June, but we got at least 3 more weeks before I'm out. So be back again next Thursday. So let us know what you want to learn about and we'll try to get it covered. All right, everyone. Have a great weekend. Have fun sewing, and hopefully these are helpful. I will talk to you guys next time. Bye, everyone.